case you missed it last week, Farmweek celebrated its 36th anniversary. The feature you'll see next appeared on that very first show. It's about Lillian Thornton of Raymond, Mississippi. She raised registered Angus cattle and did it at an age when most had been retired. She was 81 years old at the time of Farmweek's visit. Farmweek's first host, Bruce Johnson, introduces her.
A little while ago, we visited with an 81-year-old woman who lives just south of Jackson near Raymond. Not only does Mrs. Lillian Thornton get around more like a woman half her age, but she also operates by herself a livestock farm. We think you'll enjoy getting to know her.
I grew up on a farm with 12 of us, 9 boys and 3 girls, and I must have learned a great deal about some forms of farming, especially cotton farming at that time, and so it hasn't seemed too hard for me. My lawyer said when my husband died nearly 11 years ago for me to make no changes. And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "I mean for you to make no changes." I said, "What I'm going to do with all those black Angus cows that my husband has bought that we have." He said, "You're going to keep them. You know as much about it as he did." And I did. So I did keep them, and that, I think, has really meant almost the salvation of my life and my mind, because I was so busy I didn't have time to maybe grieve like I would have. I'm 81. I guess you might say I've been farming about nearly 11 years since my husband died. If I'm going to farm, I have no one to help. Therefore, I have to do whatever comes to be done. It matters not what it is. I have to find a way if I don't know how. I build my own gates. I hang them. I have a circular saw that I saw all the parts, measure all parts for a gate. Saw them all here at the house where I have electricity. Carry them to the place that I'm going to hang it. Build the gate and then hang it by way of lifts, maybe tubs, or concrete blocks or whatever, till I have nailed the hinges on and hang it. My husband had all of the fencing done before he died, but there's always breaks of one kind and another, and I repair. I have a stretcher, and usually I don't have to use a stretcher. I use 2 hammers most times to repair. I have black Angus cattle, purebred, registered. I usually keep 100 head of cattle, but I've recently sold 67 head because they haven't been worth too much. And all of the years until last year, I've had to pay income tax on what I've made on my cattle, because I'd sell some of them for breeding purposes and others to buyers whom I know. And so I have done that. But I felt that maybe I better just kind of cut down. I have only 36 now, and I'm just keeping those to kind of see whether the price goes up or whether they don't. And I raise my hay. I have 16 acres that I have cut every year for hay, and I usually get from 1,500 to 2,000 bales of hay, and that's enough for my cattle that I keep. I have a large barn that my husband made troughs all the way through, and they're big enough to hold just one bale of hay after another. I have the hay stacked back of the troughs, and I just lift those 65 and 70-pound bales over into that trough one by one until I have enough to feed as many cows as I have. I raise a garden. I would guess it's at least a 1/5 of an acre, and sometimes when I'm working it, I'm sure it's a 1/2 acre. I've had to water it consistently. Luckily, I have a lake up over where my garden is, and that pipe, I stop up one end at the garden with a stick with a rag wrapped around it. Then I go up to the levee and I fill the pipe, the lead pipe, with water. Usually takes about 6 or 8 gallons to fill it. And then I stick a stick with a rag on it in that, and keep it very tight until I wade down into the lake and put that under water with a rock on it, and then pull out the stick with the rag in it. Then I go back to the garden and pull the stick out there, and I have a great big inch of water coming out, and then I take pipes and put to the lead pipe, just shave them off and stick them in and water the whole garden. Whatever you have to do, you have to do if you have a farm. If you don't know how to do it, you have to learn.
You can watch this story again on our Farmweek website, Facebook page, or YouTube. The website address is farmweek.msucares.com. I've spoken previously with Mrs. Thornton's son-in-law, Benton Kane. He founded Kane Lithographers, a printing company in Jackson, which has been in business for more than 60 years. Mr. Kane told me that Mrs. Thornton kept the cattle several years after Farmweek visited in 1977. She eventually passed away in 1990 at the age of 93, 12 years after Farmweek's visit. She and her husband Duke were longtime residents of Philadelphia, Mississippi. Mr. Thornton was the founder and editor of the Neshoba Democrat newspaper. He was an alumnus of Mississippi State University, where he was the past president of the MSU Alumni Association. Mr. Thornton played football at MSU at the same time that Dudy Noble played sports there. Now, Mrs. Thornton was born in Montgomery County in north central Mississippi. She was an Extension Service home economist with both Mississippi State University and Louisiana State University. The Thorntons had 4 daughters, Laureen, Marynell, Lillian, and Carolyn. Now, Leighton, there's an amazing sidebar story to Mrs. Thornton's feature. Clay Boudreaux of Jackson told me this story. He had had severe heart trouble in the mid-1990s and was considering whether to proceed with a heart transplant. Well, Mr. Boudreaux said that he saw Mrs. Thornton's story on Farmweek while he was in the hospital. He said that he felt that if she could keep going, he could have that heart transplant, and he did, and it was successful. So once again, thanks to Benton Kane of Jackson for updating us on Mrs. Thornton, and thanks to Mrs. Thornton for getting us off to a good start in 1977. Now, I want to replay another piece of the video. Could we roll that video of Mrs. Thornton? Okay, she's going in the barn here. Now watch how she gets over this fence. This to me is the most amazing shot in the story. Second most is watching her build those gates. Watch, she's just 81 years old. She goes over that like it's no problem. Then watch, she comes up to the hay bales. She lifts that like it's no problem.
No problem.
See, for many years, she was in what we call the Farmweek Open, and a lot of people would ask, who is the older woman that's lifting those hay bales? Well, that was Lillian Thornton, and she was an amazing lady. Now, one thing, that was almost 11 years she had been taking care of the cattle, and look at the size of that garden she was taking care of.
Very impressive.
She was quite a woman, and I wish I had been able to meet her. I was not working for Farmweek at that time.